Welcome back to Inside Personal Growth. This is Greg Boyce, the host of Inside Personal Growth. And John, as I do all the time, I thank the listeners because now we've grown to over 300,000 people. They are all over the world. They are avid listeners, and we appreciate them. Not an overnight success. We've been at this almost 15 years and around 900 podcasts. So I don't know how I've done it, but I continue to keep going. And today we have John Ratey on the line with us, Dr. John Ratey. He's MD, and he has a new book out that I'm going to hold up here. It's actually with Ed Hallowell and John, called ADHD 2.0. And I think the affliction of ADHD is for a lot of people. So we have a lot to talk about and a lot that he can actually impart on us, because the real point of this book is the new science and the essential strategies for thriving with distraction. And I think we have plenty of distraction in our life. So John, he's an associate clinical professor of psychiatry at Harvard Medical School and internationally recognized expert in neuropsychology and wellness. He's published over 60 peer review articles, 11 books, including the groundbreaking ADHD Driven to Distraction series with his partner, Ed Hallowell, and Spark, the revolutionary new science of exercise in the brain, which established him as one of the world's foremost authorities on brain fitness connection. He's been recognized by his peers as one of the best doctors in America since 1997, and in 2016 was honored by the Massachusetts Psychiatric Society as Outstanding Psychiatrist of the Year. He's got offices, obviously, back east in Cambridge and in Los Angeles. And if you want to learn more about John, just go to johnratey, ratey.com. There you will learn more about him. And obviously, there is a book website that we'll put up as well. Go out and get a copy of this book because it is informative. It also is for people who live with people with ADHD. And you guys, both of you and Ed, say that you're suffering from it. I wouldn't say suffering because I literally have it as well. I know I do. I've not officially been diagnosed with it. But when you read your book and you look at all the symptoms, I go, yeah, I don't know if I need to be officially diagnosed or not. So, John, you mentioned that all of us probably know somebody with ADHD, or as you like to refer to it, as variable attention trait. I love that. What are some of the upsides to having ADHD, or at least being diagnosed with it? Because there are a lot of upsides. It's not all bad news.
Right. It's not all bad news at all. In fact, Ned really talks about it as a good news diagnosis. You know, that if you know you have it, you can maybe begin to manage it, but it has a lot of good benefits, like tremendous energy. Mm-hmm. Being able to, like you, being able to stick with it through 900 podcasts.
Yeah, and I'm 67 years old on top of it, so I give myself credit.
Right. But okay, so you have this energy and this pursuit of novelty, because your success probably in your podcast in part comes from your interest in something new. You're focused on the new and the novel.
I'm a very curious guy.
Yeah,
I'm curious. Yes. I'm about as highly curious as anybody out there.
and believe me, that's part of the ADD makeup, is somebody always looking for something new, something to change the way we think about ourselves and the way we're dealing with life, and which leads to a lot of creativity. Many, if not most, of our entrepreneurs, successful and unsuccessful entrepreneurs, have ADHD. You know, big names in the field of every field, really, because they're relentless in their pursuit of the new, and wanting to make us a change in the way things operate. They're the ones to call say the emperor has no clothes, saying, why are we doing it this way? This is dumb. Let's do it the other way. And it leads to innovation and change in our culture. So these also, people with ADD are incredibly sensitive and can make very good partners if they sustain their focus on any of the partnerships, both in business and personally. So
do you find these people to be more intuitive?
yeah, we say that, and I think that's probably true because what is intuition? It's like they're trying to understand things, and they're batting around ideas, and their brains are going a mile a minute. In our book, we talk a lot about how our brains are different than the norm. One particular chapter looking at using the fMRI, our fancy scans, which your audience is probably aware of if they're listening to your podcast. Well, it's watching the brain work. And what we find with most people, the sort of neurotypical, they're called, the non-ADHD people, we look at the brain organized in terms of networks now. Well, with non-ADHD people, they will have one network called, all of us have the network, the default mode network, which is really what where we're at when we're thinking of nothing, when we're daydreaming, when we're letting our mind wander. And that's opposed by the task performance network. And when we're in the task performance network, we're focused and we remain focused. And in the normal situation, when you're focused on something, the default modes network sort of shuts up. It doesn't, it's not as active. But with ADD, it never shuts up, or it doesn't, it's harder for it to shut up. And so it's like a magnet constantly pulling your attention away from whatever you're focused on. So the trick is to get something that you're really focused on, or that you're really motivated by, and a way to remind yourself that this is what you're motivated by to pursue this or that.
It's interesting because I had Stephen Kotler on here just recently, The Art of Impossible, and he's been doing a lot of neuroscience studying. Say focus is for free, curiosity, and then the curiosity leads to passion, and try and find the links between those passions. So, okay, great, focus is for free, but not everybody has the greatest ability to focus. But the curiosity comes and leads to a passion. And when those passions are strung together, you find a purpose. And then when you find that purpose, you can really be driven to create those goals. And then you can do those proximal goals. And then you can apply the grit and determination to that. And I love that kind of formula, because when you look at it, it really starts with focus, right? And then it leads to finding that passion. And you offer an arsenal of new strategies and lifestyle hacks for thriving with ADHD. What are some of the strategies that anyone listening who's been diagnosed with ADHD, whether they're diagnosed or not, all you got to do is read your book, and you really are going to find out whether or not you have ADHD or not. But I'm not certain you actually need to go to a psychologist to get diagnosed.
Right. But yeah, what you alluded to, what Kotler was talking about too, is getting to the passion, getting to that which motivates you, that you're riveted to.
Yes.
And we look at that as being connected, whether it's to people, to projects, to an idea, to a group. We call it vitamin C. That this is the biggest antidote to ADHD, to your mind wandering, if you're connected to what it is you're after. So the deal is just to get something that you're passionate enough about,
Yep.
and that that will get you interested and keep you interested, and to have the support of people around you, that to people that you're connected to, because this makes a nice launching pad for you to do what it is you're interested in.
Mm-hmm.
And especially our ADD folks, a lot of them have a history of failure, of unmet goals, of failure to thrive. Some of them, and
Well, because
early on,
they're always starting something new. They're looking
yeah,
for the next.
the next,
It's the next shiny object. But I think the older you get with ADHD, actually, the better it works for you. It seems to be anyway, because now you understand what it is you've been doing to sabotage yourself, and you recognize what it takes to actually stay with a project. I don't know if that's true, but that's been true for me.
yes, no, it is for a lot of people too. You learn coping mechanisms along the way. And a big part of that is literally reminding yourself why you're interested in whatever it is you're interested in. You wake up and you have a podcast, so you're interested in that. You're interested in what's going to happen here between us, but also in life, and that keeps you going. That keeps you focused on, and it's your job and all that, but this keeps you on it, and helps you sustain your attention, which is the biggest problem. And the way we think about it in terms of the biology, if you have this default mode, which is really mind wandering, if your mind is wandering, you can't stay focused. But if you have that active, which our ADD folks have, and it's sort of like a magnet, it pulls your attention away to get into this default mode, which it can be very problematic. Now, it's also can be the source of creativity, because you're batting around ideas in that default mode, and it may be a good one that you have an association that no one else has, and you take off and you have creativity. It's what we call intuition gone right.
Yeah.
It really is where
I
you
think when
go.
you used I wrote a book called Hacking the Gap, A Journey from Intuition to Innovation and Beyond. And what I realized was that, intuition can be that spark, right? But then you have to follow through. And the challenge is I have 8 alliterations around a circle that each is a chapter. But my point is that really, when you can get that focus and you get that passion, you really, as an ADHD diagnosed or undiagnosed person, can really make it. Now, what are these lifestyle hacks for thriving with it? You mentioned them in the book. You've got them right on the jacket of the book. So I thought we had at least cover those.
Okay, well, you may have to help me, because I don't have a copy of the book here, but that's too bad.
All right. Well, it's find the right kind of difficult, reimagine environment, brace your innate neurological tendencies, tap into the healing power of connection, and consider medication. I have a question regarding medication later on, because I don't know if I'd
No,
want
but
to do.
let me get started. Those are the chapter titles. So let me start with something that I'm immersed in, and that is talking about the benefits of exercise. Because it tunes up your biology. It does the same thing as the stimulants that we use to sharpen your attention and sustain it. By exercising, you're creating a situation where you have more dopamine and norepinephrine, to be specific, in the synaptic cleft, which is really what's needed to sustain our attention. It's the same thing that our stimulants do. And
Right.
oh, by the way, it does a lot, exercise does a lot more in terms of calming you down, sustaining your motivation, and blocking out the noise.
It also gets you focused.
Yeah.
What I've noticed is I'm an avid cyclist. So yesterday I got to do 20 miles. Today I'll do another 20 miles. The point is, after you complete an hour and a half bike ride or however long it takes somebody, you can come back and do your work, and you can be so much more efficient and effective at doing the work after you've released the dopamine and norepinephrine in your system. And then you get a better night's sleep too. On top of it.
Yeah, there's, that's what we talked about in our first podcast, Spark, and I was telling you all about
Exactly
how it changes our brain for the good. But yes, it does all those things, and it makes our brains ready to attend and also ready to pounce on a new idea. And it helps us persist with our goals. And that's a big problem with ADD, persistence.
Yeah.
Remaining on it. Now, you've persisted. You have 900 podcasts. My God, that's persistent of the first order. You had reinforcement because it was successful and it was interesting, and you got to meet amazingly interesting people, and that's itself is, continually sustaining your passion.
Yes, but you cite this Dr. Barkley in the book, who states an average person with ADHD has a life expectancy of less than 13 years less than the person without this diagnosis. Why is this, and how do we apply the 2.0 thinking so this does not have to be the case?
First, let's look at why. Why it really is more devastating than many other, even physical problems, diabetes, lung disease, heart disease, that ADD can really shorten the lifespan because it's unrecognized oftentimes, or it's untreated. And this disrupts the environment, disrupts the person, disrupts the family. It gets to be a huge issue and leads to all kinds of trauma, both personally and then for the family. And then this sets up a real negative environment and leads often to chronic failure, shame, and humiliation, which are the biggest problems against all of us, but certainly for people who have ADD, because they're sensitive. They will over-respond to that. And so the ways of around
is their level of depression higher as a result?
Yes,
and then also is suicide higher?
More depression, more anxiety. We have another mention.
Do you see the rates of suicide are higher as well?
Oh yeah, and especially because in those that have had a disruptive childhood. And, the disruptive childhood and ADD sort of often go hand in hand, not all the time, but often. So it's really, when they set themselves up to be traumatized and have repeated traumas, this leads to really poor outcome, depression, and physical and mental problems. We in our book, we talk about your friend from San Diego down there who, Dr. What's his name again?
F-E, well, let me get it for you. F-E-L-I-T-T-I.
I never knew how to pronounce it.
Felitti.
Felitti, okay. What he did the study down there in San Diego at Kaiser, he was looking at women who were in the community who were way overweight, and they came to him to his obesity clinic.
300 pounds overweight.
Yes. And he found that a number of them would be starting to lose weight and being successful, but then they'd stop. So he invited one of these people in to talk why. Well, he found out that they were holding on to a bit of their obesity because it prevented men from being interested in them, because at an early trauma of sexual abuse in their past. And this has been confirmed by many other studies now looking at that, to why some of these women who have so much weight on, it's a way of preventing interest in them.
Mm-hmm.
And it leads to, or led him, by the way, to do a very important follow-up study on just because he found that with early trauma, one gets problems later on, like you mentioned, suicide. Well, if you have more than 4 significant traumas on his scale, the ACE scale, you will likely, the incidence of suicide attempts is 1,500 times more than the quote normal person. So
I think I think, I see these shows with women, and it's not just women, it's women and men who are grossly overweight, but most of the women have been sexually abused, and I know there's no correlation here, but when you look at some of the famous people we've had in our life that we've loved, like Robin Williams, who have ADD, ADHD, everything combined into one, right? I don't know about abuse, but then to commit suicide, it kind of goes along with it, because it's got to, when you saw the guy, he was always on. It was always, and he was probably an extreme case.
Very, very extreme case. We always wanted him to talk about his ADD, he never did. But he died of Pick's disease, which is really different. That's why he committed suicide.
I don't even know what Pick's disease is.
No, I know. It's a neurologic problem. It's a degenerating brain. And that's what he was faced with. And then he decided to kill himself.
He didn't want to deal with it. Yeah.
Well, he was already beginning to deal with it, and it's a grim future.
Oh, it's I will have to study up on that one, John. Don't know anything about it. But you state that you explain ADHD to children by using a very simple analogy, and I love that. It's like having the power of a Ferrari engine, but with the bicycle strength brakes. Can you explain that kind of analogy to the listeners? Because I thought it was interesting. It's like, hey, I've got the power of a Ferrari, but I don't know when to brake.
It's not necessarily knowing when to brake. It's can you brake? Oftentimes there's a problem in putting the brakes on. The restlessness, the impulsivity, which we talk about, which are primary symptoms of people with ADHD. They have a hard time stopping. They have a hard time putting the brakes on their feelings, putting the brakes on their responses, putting the brakes on their anger or their excitement. So you have people that who are viewed as being impulsive and sometimes out of control. Yeah. So what we talk about with the brakes business to kids is say, look, we have to figure out ways of helping you get your brakes working better, making your brakes better. Now and exercise, by the way, is one of the great ways of improving your control over your impulses.
What about meditation? And
meditation, fantastic way of improving your brakes. Practice is probably the best way. Setting up your environment, as we say in one of our chapters, setting up your ideal environment to help sustain your pursuit of what it is you're after.
Right.
That's
environment is a big thing for people with ADHD.
Oh, absolutely.
I
and
mean, if there's too many things around them, it's distracting. And if you're lucky, you can't see my desk on each side of me. But the point is that, yeah, to get that focus, to keep it consistent, requires us to have I call a harmonized environment.
oh
Uh,
man,
in in particular, for me, it needs to be in balance and harmony. Um, and you listed the telltale signs of ADHD. We've been talking about them now for the last 20 minutes. And if someone out there listening uh, wants to be diagnosed officially, what would you suggest that they go about doing? I
well
mean,
first,
look, they can pick up this book, and
yeah,
I think they could self-diagnose. But if they didn't believe what they read, then they could go get diagnosed.
well, yeah,
Is there a
believe
place to go?
yeah, yeah, sure. There's a place to go. You start off with uh, your general practitioner that you're working with, PCP. They might have advice as to who to see. To get a formal diagnosis if that's what you need. First of all, you may not need it if you understand it and you can hack it. Like you're big on biohacking or brain hacking, which I love.
Yeah,
If
yeah,
you can find a way to do that, then and a lot of people can understand that they have it and make the appropriate changes in their life to help avoid the pitfalls. Now, one of the big pitfalls of ADD is addiction and incredible self-esteem challenges, and can lead to the sensitive nature of all of us, but certainly ADD people who take failure seriously. They're oftentimes ruminating about what they haven't done, even though they might be very successful. They ruminate and want to deal with things that they haven't done. And I have many stories. We have many stories of people that have been incredibly successful, would come in and they want to get their attention right so that they can, this one guy who helped all the banks do their checks way back, be able to computerize the check writing. And he was a young guy, but incredibly successful. But he wanted to go back to college, first year of college, to do that math course, which he could never get. But he was driven to prove to himself that he could understand it, and
I see.
so,
Almost like an obsession.
yeah,
To
well,
an
it is.
obsession. Yeah.
It is because
Yeah.
yourself, even though he was, he'd come to the office in a brand new sports car every week when I was seeing him, a different one. Why? Because he was so successful, and yet he was beset by these demons saying that you were stupid. Is anything but stupid, right? But
Right. Don't you get it, guy? You got a brand new sports car every day.
it's amazing. So but it's and you can really get into these ruminations, and you can get carried away with it.
Yeah, I can see that about that.
Yeah.
Now, speak with us about the connection between the cerebellum and ADHD, and how improving the cerebellum function can improve the ADHD symptoms.
Right. Well, the cerebellum is our little brain in the back of our head, and it has become very much in the forefront of neuroscience in the past 15 years, because we're unpacking it and understanding how important it is. And now the cerebellum is mainly thought of, or has mainly been thought of, as keeping our balance and coordination, movement-wise. Well, in fact, it's movement and coordination of all of our brain activity, including our higher functions, including mood, and certainly including attention. And what we've learned in the past 10 years is how important this is for attention and attention deficit, that we need to boost the effectiveness of the cerebellum and to help guide our attention, to keep our attention working right.
How do you recommend boosting that?
Well,
cerebellum?
in our book, we
What
talk
have you
about
found out?
what ways to do that
Yeah.
is to train your balance and coordination. You know,
Okay.
standing on one foot, using the Bosu ball, you know, using balance boards, you know, playing sports, using sports that involved a lot of changes, and you know, the biggest one that we have lots of data on is dance. The benefits of dance, because you get a lot of brain activity, a lot of muscle activity, brain activity, but
you gotta think.
You got to think at the same time, right?
Unlike riding a bicycle, you don't really have to think much.
Right, unless you, unless, yeah.
You can just put your feet in the pedals and just keep going. But dancing, you got to remember the moves, and if you don't remember the moves, you're in trouble. I haven't ever been a big dancer, but the fact that you talked about the balancing beam or using those boards that people sit on,
Yep.
I would think that surfing would be one
Oh,
that would probably be great for the cerebellum.
tremendous for actually many ADD people down your way are surfers, because it really calms them down. You know, that it's excitement, it's being on the edge, it's all the stuff that ADD people love, but at the same time, they're stimulating their brain in such a way that their attention is better.
So that would go along for jujitsu or Aikido, any of the Eastern martial arts would be a great way.
Right.
That's super.
Yeah, because you have to get the movement right, the form right before you advance, and that's a struggle. So you're having to attend to it at the same time, involving you know, struggle of your muscles to get it right, and that trains your attention.
Yoga as well. Now I was big into yoga until the pandemic, and then obviously all the classes stopped. But I'm back at it again now. Thank God. It keeps me going. Now, you speak about the right kind of difficult and the importance of someone with ADHD finding that right creative idea or project. How do people with ADHD find the superpower, and how can you help them, John?
You can help them by pointing out, by having them explore what it is that they're really, what really grips them. You know, the right kind of difficult, meaning that which is difficult for you, but it's something you want to do, you want to have, you want to learn, you want to. I mean, Ned talks about his right kind of difficulty being writing. He's dyslexic, you know, Ned, and now has 25 books to his credit, you know, and each one is a struggle, but that keeps him focused and keeps him motivated. And you know, and I'm similar in writing the books that I've written. I mean, they didn't come easy. It was the right kind of difficult. I like, for myself, I was very gifted in math, but when I went to college, I became a philosophy major and religion major and literature major. I took no math and very little science in college because I really wanted to be better at writing, because I knew that that was a struggle for me. And so I mean, philosophy, you write more than any other subject you could think of.
Right. Well, I think writing a book is look, everybody's got their own process, but once you find the process that works for you, in my case, I've only done 2 books, not as many as, Ed, but or you. But the reality is that you've got to get a cadence that works for you and figure out what that is and stay with it. And that's the important thing. And then I always say, don't read what you wrote, just write. Because if you read what you wrote, you're going to spend your whole time correcting what you wrote. Now, in your chapter on move to focus, move to motivate, the power of exercise, you're the expert on this, the Spark book. You discuss the importance of exercise for people diagnosed with ADHD. Why is it that exercise, you've talked a little bit about it, the norepinephrine and the release of the chemicals. Why is it that exercise is so important to helping ADHD people diagnosed stay focused? Is it just typically, is it really the chemical release that
Well,
they get?
it's all kinds of things. I mean, you make your brain work better. You make your brain work best when in the exercise mode. Afterwards, you improve your memory, your working memory, short-term memory. You improve the so-called executive functions, meaning our focus, sustaining our focus, being able to switch focus, because a lot of ADD people have trouble switching. Once they get focused on something, they can't switch as easily as they should. And exercise helps this fluidity of thinking, which is very important for us in life, and to be successful and to move on.
Yeah,
So
it's interesting, but your other book really does do a great job. At we'll put a link to that as well. Spark, that would be a good one for them to read. Now, you list a very daunting list of medications that can be prescribed for ADHD, and I looked at the page and I almost fell off of my chair. Under what circumstances do you believe that medication should be prescribed, and to what length should parents or individuals attempt alternatives before reverting to medications?
well, I mean, this is a big moment of our book. See, because people have such a prejudice about ADD. That's one of the reasons why we talked about calling it VAST, variable attention stimulus trait, a trait rather than a diagnosis, rather than a deficit, because it conveys such a negative image and a negative sense of being. Similarly with medicine is very useful. And, people are against it, much like they're against the vaccination for some reason. I mean, they're against it because it seems like it's cheating or it's going to harm you. They have the same kind of worry. Are you going to be a slave to it? No, the medicine is just to help, and especially for people who have very significant cases of ADHD that aren't treated by the exercise and by finding your right focus and all that. But
I think I heard it once said, John, that I don't know who told this story to me, but some other author. It's like, hey, look, you go in the doctor and if the doctor diagnosed you with diabetes and you need to take medication, you take it, and they will take it. But if they diagnosed you with ADHD or some other OCD or whatever, and they said, hey, I've got a medication to help you, there seems to be this like, hey, I don't want to do that. But the mind is still part of the body. It's just that I don't think people look at it that way. They think it's a crutch.
right.
Well,
but it can be a crutch for people in general. The medicine can, very useful. I'm sure you are aware of the college environment where people sell their Adderall
Yeah,
or
yeah.
their stimulant to help people when they're taking a test or when they're writing a paper, because it'll help them stay in their chair to get their projects done. And that in that sense, it can be a crutch, but it can be very life-changing for people who really need it. And this is what's important. Not to, I mean, you know, it's gotten such a bad rap because so many people have been diagnosed with ADD and so much has been made of the medication. And we have good medicine
Yeah.
for ADHD now, you know, and a wide variety actually.
Well, I
But
know my wife was a school teacher for 25 years, and the
yeah,
kids would come in, and there would be a lot, you know, she'd have to remind them, "Did you take the medicine?" or "Did you take your medicine?" And I think the people that are educating children with ADHD, they recognize the need for it. Whether they're an advocate of it or not isn't important. What they realize is that they usually do better with it, especially kids.
yeah.
Um, Otherwise, they would be off the wall the whole time. So that's a good thing. Now, if you were to leave the listeners with 3 points about the new science and the strategies to thrive with distraction, and I love you not using the term ADHD, even though it is the title of the book, but the reality is you if you'd have put the other reference to the variable reference you made, you probably wouldn't get as many people buying the book.
Right,
So
right.
the point is that if this new science and strategies to thrive this distraction, what would be the 3 things you'd want to leave our listeners with?
Well, I think there's is first off is detoxifying it, taking away the deficit and seeing it as a human trait that can be, you know, seriously affecting your life, so that it's something that you need to understand and need to deal with it. And you can do that by, you know, all the different, by our book, by all the different stuff on the internet, by hiring a coach, by working with people who understand it.
And
And
you
there's,
have a huge reference section. I should
yeah,
show my listeners. I've never seen a reference section in a book as extensive as this. So definitely go to the back of the book and look at the Appendix B because you'll find plenty of reference there, right?
right, right. And it's reaching out for help if you need it, but making yourself aware of what ADHD is. And then going back to the beginning, also using exercise as a daily part of your life. All of us should be, as you are, you know, you're cycling 20 miles a day, you know, at least, uh,
Trying. It's not
trying.
every day. I have a spin bike upstairs. My point is that I try to do some, I at least walk or I ride a bike or I get down and do push-ups or I, you know, whatever it might be. I'm pretty active. And I
Yeah,
think the point is when you have ADHD, to take the focused time to meditate or journal or do yoga or ride a bike or surf or whatever the activity is, an activity that isn't sitting in front of your computer.
absolutely, absolutely. You know, there's absolutely getting into life. You know, not only does it work on your attention, but it works on your mood, your stress level, your anxiety. It helps you decrease the power of the cravings that lead us to no good. So for every reason, that exercise is should be a huge part of anybody's life, but certainly people who have, you know, or else, you know, on the end of the curve of people who have variable attention trait,
Right.
that they're in need of something to help them. And so exercise is there, finding the right, you know, connection to, you know, that which is going to motivate you and keep you at it, like
Right.
your podcast business, that's just a perfect example. It sustained you. It provided a lot of interest and a lot of fun over the years, I'm
Oh
sure.
yeah. Yeah, yeah. And I think that whether you find it in something like doing a podcast or working with a charity of some type or doing that, I know when I do this show, all the donations that come in from authors, I give them away. I actually go out and interview people who have found themselves homeless. And
Yep.
I'm stringing that together. I turn that into a different project, right? So it's just like an ADHD person to say, hey, well, the podcast, what can you do with it? Where can you take it? And how can you help and serve people? And then I think you point out some points that exercise is there, right? That's a key one. That's a strategy. Recognizing that it's not a bad thing, well, maybe not a strategy, is truly something that it is. And what would be the third one you'd want to give people?
Well, that third one is to learn how to engineer your environment.
Okay.
Really think about how to make you most successful, how to help you get the breaks, or to remind you that this is what you want to do. Using our computer and our iPhones these days, that we have ready access to things, to ways of keeping you focused, or reminding you to stay focused, bringing you back to that which you're interested in. And your environment at home or at work can be, you can make it so that it's friendly to promoting your being focused. And I think that's, and we talk about it by maximizing your, finding the great environment. And that's really important. And with that also means finding the right people,
Right.
finding the right connection to sustain you. As you mentioned, you're writing your book, but one of the things for me has always been that I needed a co-author or a ghostwriter, or in Spark, you mentioned going back over it and not getting forward. I had a co-author. It was really a ghostwriter who was a editor.
Yeah.
Well, you know what editors do. They want everything exact,
Yeah. Yeah, I do know what
and I'd be
editors do.
flying along and writing, and he'd say, no, you can't say that. We got to go back and change this. And I said, no, let's just finish it, and then we'll go back and change it.
Exactly.
We almost got into a fist fight over that. I mean, but it's, you need,
But
I need somebody to, and not for,
your support system was this guy.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I've had them in all the stuff that I've done. I've always had somebody I've worked
Well,
with.
I mean, look, you co-authored this book.
Yes, yes.
So again, Ed is your co-author, and
Right.
by the way, it is Ed Hallowell, MD, and John Ratey. And I'm going to say, go out and buy. We'll have a link to Amazon so you can pick this book up. I think for those of you who think you might have ADHD, a perfect book. For those of you who have ADHD and you've already been diagnosed and you've got it, a perfect book. This is a great book for you to give you some new strategies and coping mechanisms. And so, John, it's been a pleasure having you back on the show again. It's been, what do we say, 8 years in between, but at least it's great having you back. The only thing that's happened to us is, well, your hair isn't white yet, but mine now is whiter. But
I have a white streak down the middle.
I see the white streak. That's about it.
Yeah.
But I don't color it, nor will I ever color it. So that's the point. But I really appreciate your time. Give my best to Ed, if you would. I know that I've spoken with him many times, and I appreciate you being on Inside Personal Growth. And thanks for a great interview and a great podcast.
Well, thanks for having me, and I really enjoyed touching base with you again.